hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, joined by Christy Casciano Burns. Mike Benelli is on assignment today, coaching of all things, if you can believe that, a rare thing on the show. Our guest today is one of the most respected performance coaches in the NHL. As the current performance coach for the Boston Bruins, Kevin Neeld has been instrumental in optimizing athletic development, injury prevention, and on-ice performance for elite hockey players. With a background that spans youth hockey to the NHL, Kevin brings in a wealth of knowledge in sports science, strength and conditioning, and player development. He's also the author of several books on hockey training and is widely regarded as one of the top educators in the field of athletic performance. Today, we're going to dive into his journey through the NHL, his insights on youth hockey and how players can maximize their potential, and his advice for parents navigating the developmental space that one might surprise you. Kevin, we're thrilled to have you on the show today. Welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here, man. Let me jump in with the juicy question that I know our listeners love. You've worked with some of the best players in the league and the world at the highest levels. Can you share some stories or insights about maybe what separates NHL athletes from the rest, even in mindset, preparation, all of it? For the kids listening especially, they always want to know those little tips and tricks maybe that separates an NHL athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably dive into that topic for the next several hours, but in the interest of
20 seconds. No, I'm just kidding, Kevin.
Yeah, no, in the interest of keeping things a little more digestible here, I think there's a couple things that have really jumped out to me, not only about the players that make it to the NHL level, but the ones that are the most successful at that level. And I think one is a humility to consistently want to get better. The best players that I've had an opportunity to work with that, are, between my 2 years in San Jose and my time in Boston, there's a handful of what will end up being first ballot Hall of Fame players there. And I think the commonalities among all of them is that they were constantly, right through the last year of their careers, they were constantly trying to find ways to get better. I think they were open to feedback. They were coachable. They communicated with their line mates and their teammates well about what they saw that could help them get better. And, I think there's a real humility to that, to have the level of success that those guys have had and still be that eager for improvement. So, that's a big one that stood out to me. And then the other one, and this may be a little bit less intuitive for people that aren't working in an environment where you're playing 3.5 games every week. But, our players, basically from the time the training camp opens through the end of the season, are in the rink every day. There's some days off, but it's largely a 7-day-a-week ordeal. And because of that, there's an expectation from our aspect that players come in and they go through some preparation warm-up process before every single skate, which means game days, there's a morning skate, and then there's a game later at night, every practice day. And, there's a monotony to the day-to-day of the NHL life where you're going through the exact same processes over and over and over and over. And I think the players that have been the most successful are the ones that don't even think about, they don't make it a conscious decision to do the right thing. They just come in and do it. They embrace the monotony of the day to day, and they just, there's no mental energy exhausted at all and trying to decide do I, want to go through my hip and core preparation work before practice, or, I'm a little tired. Do I really want to go in and train or warm up? They just show up and do the right things day in and day out. And, I think that it's that thought process that has allowed a lot of those guys to be so successful for so long, because, the game, there's wear and tear associated with all sports, but particularly ice hockey. And I think one of the best ways to last a long time is to take care of yourself. And, a lot of those guys have embraced the habits off the ice that allow them to stay healthy and keep playing the game that they love.
Kevin, that's the perfect recipe for the elite athlete. A lot of our listeners, moms and dads with younger athletes, I bet you we could get some takeaways from that. Of course, we don't want the monotony for our kids. We don't want that rigorous return because they're kids. But what kinds of things, what kinds of habits can kids develop now that's going to help them succeed at hockey, be that better athlete, and throughout their life?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Sometimes I'll talk to our players and say, the message coming from you the kids will actually listen to, even if their parents have told them to do the same things 1,000 times. And, I think really, to answer your question, it's the basics that everybody listening is probably aware of, but still a lot of people listening probably struggle with the consistency. And, the number one recovery tool, both for your body from a physical standpoint, for your brain, which is really important, not just in learning, in some of the, the cognitive benefits of that, but more focused on hockey, like skill development. You put in the work during the day, but those things are reinforced and reintegrated into your, you learn at night when your brain is recovering. So, decision making on the ice, the ability to do that at the highest level that you're personally capable of is dependent upon your brain being well rested and in a state that it has the energy to do that. So, sleep is by far the number one thing that I think kids struggle with. I mentioned before we hopped on here, I have a 7-year-old son at home that just thinks it's the coolest thing to stay up late. And then, the next day, the mood's a roller coaster, his energy is a roller coaster. And, I think the more consistently you can instill, consistent bedtimes, consistent wake times, we really, even with our players, try to reinforce like the bedroom environment should be cold, it should be completely dark, and it should be quiet. So, obviously, like kids at really young ages, some of them have night lights, and
PlayStations.
Exactly, you go through that process, but the darker you can have your room, and the quieter you can have it, the more rested you're going to be. And I think, as just like a thought experiment here, if you close your eyes and somebody hits the light switch on in your room and then hits it again, you're going to know whether your eyes are open or closed if the lights are on and off. And that's because even through your closed eyelids, your eyes can perceive light. And light is one of the main drivers to stimulate your body that you should be awake. So, I think even simple things like for the players and parents listening that have phones on the, the bedstand right next to it, if that's face up and anytime a message or an alert comes through and it's lighting up, that is waking you up while you sleep, whether you're, actively sitting up out of bed and moving or not. Same thing like with the vibrations and everything else. So, I think that's a big one. The other big one is nutrition. And, that's a battle with young kids that I can certainly empathize with. But, so many of the kids that I come across don't eat vegetables at all. And really, people at all ages should be striving to get, at a minimum 3 servings a day and really closer to 5. And, people, what's a serving? Like if you just use the palm of your hand as a rough size guide, I think most people are coming really short of what they should be getting as a minimum input there. And it's something that, I try to talk to my kids about a lot, about, that the food is literally the building blocks that your body is made out of. Your body, when you eat food, breaks it down into these different parts that are then shuttled to different areas of your body. It builds your muscles, it builds your bones, it builds and reinforces your brain structure and a bunch of different other parts of your body. And if you are putting low quality ingredients in, then you're building a low quality product on the other side of it. And I think just having an awareness too of the response that you have to certain foods, like when you have anything that's high in sugar, your blood sugar goes way up and your energy goes way up. And then your body realizes that there's been this massive spike in the amount of sugar circulating in your body. You probably don't need it. So it pulls it all out. And then there's a crash afterwards where your blood sugar is actually lower than where it was before you started. And along with that, your energy goes down. Your mood follows that same roller coaster. We're then on the back end of having something with a lot of sugar in it that, you don't want to do things. You're not as motivated. You're not as coachable. You're not as open to trying new things, open to feedback. So, there's certainly a time and a place for ice cream and other foods that kids enjoy, and they should enjoy and have those opportunities. But I think the standardized diet for kids that I see is, you have some sort of like waffle or pancake or something, or cereal for breakfast. Then you're eating whatever the school gives you. Kids are sucking down sports drinks and stuff at the rink, a lot of which are loaded with sugar that they
Massive
don't need.
amounts. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reality is, the only thing that resembles real food that kids eat on a day-to-day basis is whatever their parents are feeding them for dinner. And, that sometimes can,
that's a toss up too.
Exactly. Can leave a little bit to be desired. So,
but there's lots of ways that parents can compensate that for that, because you can hide those vegetables, especially if you get a juicer, and there's kind of creative ways that you can put those veggies in a meal without them even realizing they're eating it.
Yeah, like our kids love chili. So that's what we do. And,
perfect.
So my wife and I differ in our approaches to the recipe there sometimes, but my kids the other week were pulling carrots out. I'm like, "Do you put carrots in chili?" But whatever, it all ends up tasting the same anyway. So
my mom would put them in muffins, carrots in muffins. I remember I'd be eating it and be like, "Is this a carrot in the muffin?" And she goes, "Yeah, but it tastes fine." Right? I was like, "Well, yeah." So you just keep eating it. It's funny.
I won't even tell you where I put the broccoli, kids. So.
Yeah, you don't need to know where the broccoli's at.
You don't need to know that.
I'll tell you a few funny things here. The way, and this was kind of a happy accident. The way I got my kids to love vegetables, and they do, was by accident. We were fortunate. We went to a hibachi, and they do just a great job with the vegetables there. And ever since then, they just weren't bothered by it. Another thing I wrote down here, Kev, I think this is something all parents can do. And we should say this too. Parents, you are the biggest advocate for this for the kids. You can't expect the kids to really know or understand. Why wouldn't they want McDonald's? Why wouldn't they want sweets, right? That's what it is to be a kid. So you really need to lead the charge. And, we've heard all of them, the I don't want to say excuses, but I've got so many kids. I have no time. You got to make the time for this, whether they play hockey or not, to be honest with you, right? And it doesn't take as much time as I think we think it does. But Kevin, one of the things I did with my kids that really worked, I taught them to read labels on the side of a package. And I showed them that, when it says 125% of your sugar for the day in a Pepsi, probably should not drink that Pepsi, right? And so they're pretty active. We made a kind of a scavenger hunt of, this is too high, right? This is not enough. So I think that parents, first off, all labels now have to show the percentage of sugar. That's somewhat new, right? They weren't doing that 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So teach your kid, like if it's over, I mean, Kevin, I'll let you be the expert, but I always say it, guys, if it's over 12, 13%, I mean, you're pushing it, right? And parents, again, Gatorade, not great for your kids, right? A lot of these sports drinks that tout themselves as like recovery, or we have electrolytes, way too much sugar in them, right? They're not helping. Right. And then the other things too, Kevin, I talk about like Prime. All the kids love Prime right now. I'm like, you guys got to look what's in that. I don't know how bad or good that is, but it's not like they just took, there's other stuff in that.
Yeah. Kevin, I think when you sweat, you're not just losing water, you're losing salt and, you're losing electrolytes. So, I think where sports drinks originated is that you should be replenishing more than just water in those time periods where you're sweating a lot.
Right.
You're also, in a practice or in a game, you're also burning energy. You're burning sugar among other energy sources. So, slowly sipping on something that has sugar in it while you're playing isn't a bad thing. I think the leap that a lot of people took, including me when I was younger, was that, it's called a sports drink. If it's good for me while I'm playing sports, it's probably good for me when I'm not. And the way that your body handles and needs sugar outside of actually playing, so at periods more of rest, is totally different than the way it does when you're engaged in sport. So, I think that's the big message is not to just, guzzle those things down away from when you're actually playing. And, teaching kids to read labels is huge. Like I kind of laugh. My 7-year-old son's flipping, bottles and boxes around, and he's like, "All right, Dad, this says 1 gram of sugar and 12 grams of protein." He's like, "This is pretty good for me." It's like, yeah, that's, even if you just anchor to those two things, right? How much sugar, how much protein, that's a good start there. And, the other thing you mentioned, and I think as parents, it is almost always an uphill climb to get your kids to do the right things from a nutrition standpoint. And the thing that I would say is that it's worth it. It's worth every
Totally.
fight. It's worth putting your foot down. We've had a handful of I understand if you don't want to eat this, but this is the next thing you're eating. So
Right.
you can eat it now, you can eat it in an hour, you can eat it tomorrow morning for breakfast, but
We'll
and
have
it's,
that fight.
yeah, exactly. It's like it's that important that kids are eating the right things and they're learning that it's that important to do those things. And we've bought in some of those like frozen popsicle molds, and we'll blend up like Greek yogurt and fruit and things like
Right.
that. And, that becomes dessert for them.
Right.
I've taken like some chocolate protein powders and mixed it in with Greek yogurt. That actually tastes like chocolate mousse or
Right.
Yeah.
a cheesecake filling, depending on what you're making. So there are ways to
Right.
do it that are more palatable and kid friendly. But I think the big message from my standpoint is that it's worth it.
It is worth it. You're right. I'm so glad you brought this up, the importance of good sleep. That is so important. Good nutrition. But we also want to talk about the importance of the mental health picture of this. And that can be a difficult challenge, especially these days with parents and kids getting bombarded with social media, negative messages. It's a real battle out there for youngsters. What advice would you give to the parent as they try and guide their kid through what can be a difficult journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think now there seems to be, and when I was growing up playing, I feel like I was almost witnessing this transition in real time where sport when I grew up was, you'd go outside, you'd play with the neighborhood kids. Some days it's, you're playing flag football. Some days for us, we're playing street hockey or shooting hoops, playing basketball. And sport was a way to, to be active, to have fun, to compete with your friends. And I for me growing up, like I fell in love with hockey, and that's what me and my older brother spend almost all of our free time doing. But it was because we loved the sport and we were doing it. My dad had never played hockey. He had no horse in the race to push us to, fulfill some sort of some sort of dream that he had. There was no, there was nothing put on us about, you need to do this so you can get a scholarship or compete for everything that my older brother and I went through was because we loved the sport and we wanted to be great at it. And, I think really quickly that's turned into, we've almost professionalized youth sports. And I think, with the NIL changes that are taking place in college, that the trickle down effect of that is going to be worse in that regard, that there's going to be opportunities for people to make money, a very, very small proportion of people to make money. And as a result of that, everybody's going to be pushing for it. And that's going to have an even more profoundly negative impact, I think, on youth sports. And, I think with regards to mental health, like sports are supposed to be fun. And, there's a lot of adversity built into sport competition, and there doesn't need to be more added by the parents. So,
Right.
I think there's, now decades of research that are shining a light on why so many kids across sports quit when they turn 13 and 14 years old. And pretty consistently, one of the main reasons is the parents, that, the pressure and the constant negative feedback put on the kids by the parents is what drives a lot of kids out of the sport at times when, they're transitioning into high school. And it should be, there should be opportunities to continue enjoying the sport and having a lot of fun. And, I think the thing that I've realized that, working now in professional hockey for close to a decade is that everybody's there for different reasons. But the thing that is consistent across all the players is that they are exceptionally unique.
Yeah.
And some are there because they have exceptionally unique skill sets. Some are there because physically they just have, incredible speed and power, strength, or, an engine from a conditioning standpoint that they can keep going and going and going. And, I think that, obviously there's value for kids striving to be their best. I think there's also it's important for parents to recognize that not everybody's ceiling is professional athlete. Not everybody's ceiling is Division I athlete. And there is so much more to sport than just competing at, a professional or, national team level that is being stripped away from kids because of the pressure that's being put on them to excel up to those levels. So, mental health, I think it starts at home. I think it starts with having a support network around you. That starts with the parents. That includes teammates. I think for coaches and parents to encourage the players to support each other and to pick each other up and to look for people that maybe need a little extra support, and look for the kids that are down, or maybe are a little bit more on the outside from a social standpoint. And I can tell you, I've had I've had an opportunity now in Boston to work with Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron, that are two guys that I'm not sharing any secrets here, that are regarded as two of the better leaders in the history of the sport. And the thing that both of those guys share is that they are constantly looking out for what struggles their teammates may be going through and how they can support them through that. And I think that that is obviously a testament to their character and to their personalities and their leadership. But I also think there's a lesson there that two of the best players to ever do it, two of the best leaders to ever do it, that's their mentality. So, if you're a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, there are opportunities for you. If you're the best kid on your team, you're the one that maybe has a little bit of swagger, it's easy for you to look down on the other kids around you because they're not as good as you. There's also an opportunity for you to support those other kids and to pick them up and to try to bring out the best in them, which ultimately is what brings out the best in a team. I think that there's a lot of value in teaching kids that the best way for a team to have success isn't just to ride the best players. It's to help bring out the best in every single person on the roster. And as you ascend to higher and higher levels, seasons end based on a single play. And that single play isn't always your best player, making a great move and scoring a goal. A lot of times it's, it might be the fourth line guy that needs to clear a puck out of the zone. And, if he's feeling good and confident and he makes that play, it may save a season. You might have somebody else that from a mental standpoint is feeling, is crumbling a little bit more under the pressure, doesn't feel the support and feels isolated in that moment, that, fails to make that play, and the puck can end up in the back of your net too. I think that team success is really contingent upon everybody playing at their highest level, and that requires people supporting each other throughout the process.
Yeah, I agree. And my favorite saying, and I signed this when I wrote a book called The Puck Hog, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's a kid's book. And when I autograph the books, I always say a real star makes everybody shine.
Yeah.
And that's the exact message that you're conveying right now. You might be the star, the leader on the team, but it also gives you an opportunity to help elevate the rest of the kids on the team and to help them rise too. So thank you for sharing that message. Another thing, which you said at the top of this show, you said what separates the more elite athlete, the real special athlete, is their humility, the humility in wanting to get better. And sadly, I am seeing less and less of that. What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's, my kids, again, I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old that are just really entering that journey. I think, I've had some exposure to, the YouTube and TikTok scenes, and I just feel like there's more pressure now on kids, and there's more of an opportunity for kids to try to, they have access now to seeing these other kids that are at a really, really high level, that are promoting themselves. And I feel like that's kind of led to people really wanting to put the spotlight on themselves, maybe more than, certainly my and former generations had an opportunity to go through. And, again, kids resemble and portray the qualities that they're surrounded by. And,
Sure.
it's harder and harder, I think, now for parents and teachers, because there is so many there are so many more influences that are going into the kids than, for us growing up. It was, you had your family, you had, the friends, the people that surrounded you on a day-to-day basis. But, the internet wasn't what it is now. And, the interconnectedness with video games and people on headsets and talking to people all over the world, like, there's some good that comes from that, but there's also some challenges that are unique to how connected and the exposure that kids have these days. And, I think that I won't pretend that it's easy from a parenting standpoint or from a coaching standpoint or from an athlete standpoint to, do some of the things I just mentioned and supporting the people around you. I just think it's important. So, if there's more noise coming from other sources than, the voice from the coaches and the parents and the siblings and the teammates, that voice needs to get louder.
Well,
I agree.
I can
Yeah.
comment on this too, Christy, because again, Kev, my kid's just a few years older than yours. And I can tell you some things that I'm seeing that didn't exist 20
Okay.
years ago. Mike AAA was not a thing 20 years ago. Here's one for everybody. There are far less B teams than I've ever seen. There's way more AAA, AA. And just because it says that does not mean you're a true whatever letters you
elite
put there,
athlete.
right? There was nothing wrong with being on a B team when I was a kid. It was a developmental structure. Other things I have seen, and I like starkly against this. Parents of 8-year-old kids telling their kids their NHL potential. All right. Someone came up to me once and said, well, come on, Lee, don't you want your kids to play in the NHL and the PWHL? I said, yeah, sure. Excuse me. Of course. Yeah. Like that's my thing. Like I'm not putting that on them. Right. Like what parent wouldn't want to, that's just kind of a dumb question. Like what parent wouldn't want to see their kid get there? I'm not going to put that on them. That's my thing. Right. And then I always follow it up with, that would be like a nice little dream scenario. And this is the key. Kev, I'll say this to you. I'll say it to you, Christy. I think that it's so important that parents understand you do not want your child's worth to be attached to the outcome of a game or to the outcome of their performance alone. Okay? And I mean, like, if there's great effort and they lose, I'm not saying that shouldn't hurt, but you should not tie their love to that win or loss. And I see parents doing that. And I think they do it unknowingly because they definitely love their kids. But the messages you're giving your kids, another one too, we talked about social media. These kids are growing up in a human highlight reel. And we're not saying enough. That's not reality. I think we're starting to. I think that this current crop of parents sees that. I think that, parents to the parents, point of view, like, if you parented 15 years ago, like you didn't know what was coming with social media. This is evolving. Here's another one that I'm seeing on benches now. We have to encourage our kids, and we're talking, 12, 11, 10 years old, to kind of cheer for big plays. Like when your goalie makes a big save, they're very quiet on the bench, which was not the way it was when I was growing up. Right. So, but I see that as an opportunity, as you were saying, Kev, to teach the team thing. Like when your goalie makes a big save, everybody should be standing up about that. Same thing with big plays.
That doesn't happen.
It's eerily silent. Now, by the end of the season, we got them moving, but here's the thing. We had to explain to them, the situation and why that's important. And, we went to our goalie. Do you hear that when they yell? Yeah, it makes me feel good. Right. Things like that. Yeah. Kev, it also makes me think of a quote too, that I love, which is you talked about Chara and the great leadership. Good players play great. Great players make everyone around them play great.
Correct.
And that is a skill set you can teach. And I think that, a lot of parents will say, they either have that or you don't. BS. Like this is the mentorship that coaches and parents need to be bringing to the game. You should be encouraging your kid to be a great teammate. We talk about the car ride home all the time. Are you pointing the finger? Are you being accountable or not? Because if you get in the car and say, well, if that kid passed or that penalty or that ref or that coach didn't do, it's a horrible message.
Yeah.
It may be true.
It may be true.
Yeah, but it's a horrible
bite
message.
your tongue.
Yeah,
it does happen.
It does, but it's all about how you word it. Like, so Christy,
Right.
I'll say to my kids, and like, look, when you play youth hockey, you're gonna get youth refs. You're gonna get, that kind of type of officiating. So I'll say something like, yeah, look, I didn't agree with that call either. It's a tough call. What are we gonna do to respond to it?
Right.
Now you've created a way better conversation, mental approach, some level of accountability than just, that ref screwed you. If that ref wasn't, like, guys, like, that's not the way it should work in hockey.
Right.
And at the highest level, Kev, you've seen it. I doubt there's a lot of finger pointing if it's not constructive in the sense of we need to be better, right?
No, for sure. And the referee thing, I won't spend too much time on that, but I will just say that the referees across professional sports are the best at what they do.
Right.
They have the most experience. They were selected based on the expertise and the abilities that they've shown at different levels to reach that point. And they still, every single game, are heavily scrutinized for things that they may have missed. So with that in mind, the teenage kid that's reffing your kid's peewee hockey game, they have a 0% chance that they're going to get it right every time. There's no chance.
They're learning.
And, if anybody is, I would encourage people, if they have a lot of negative feedback for refereeing, to try it. Because when you step out there and you realize how many different things that you have to keep in place, it's easy from the stands to say, oh, that guy was offsides. It's a little harder when you're also trying to keep track of what's going on behind the play,
right.
Especially in youth hockey where, it's not like the NHL where you have two linesmen and two referees and, you have a couple guys that are trying to do all of it together at once. There's no chance they're going to get it right. So, I think to your point, Lee, to me, it's not even worth commenting on at all. If there's, if somebody misses a call, it's part of the human experience that people make mistakes. Referees are not immune to that either. To your point, I think, understanding over time, some are going to go your way, some are not, that's going to kind of balance out. But in those moments where things are not going your way from a call standpoint, you have to come together as a player, as a group, as a team, and overcome that adversity.
Absolutely. And that's the real lesson.
Exactly. And, one thing that you had mentioned earlier on the Mite AAA teams, I think it's really, really important that we keep a really clear definition of what elite means.
We're not doing a good job with that, Kevin.
No, we're not. And it's because, everybody wants to have, it feels good to say, I'm on the elite team or, I'm on the AAA team. But the reality is the best 8-year-old in the world is not good by a really elite standpoint. There are no 8-year-olds playing in the NHL. There's no 12-year-olds that are making Olympic rosters. It doesn't, that is elite.
Yeah.
Anything short of that, you're in a developmental stage.
Right.
So, to me, like, there is no such thing as elite 8-year-olds, elite 10-year-olds. There's elite 18 and, through 43 or however old the oldest players are. But anything short of that, throw the word out, because
I love you're saying this, man.
The other, and anybody that's been around the game for a long enough time has seen that the best players at 8 are not always the best players at 18. And, I've seen kids that at 13, 14 years old, best players on their team, in the conversation for, national caliber players, meaning in their age group, they're one of the top 20 to 30 kids in the country, that by 18 are not Division I ready. So it can change that fast. Right. In the course of 4 years, you can go from one of the best kids in the country to not capable of playing at the Division I level. And I think that the message there is that at 14, you could also not be on anybody's radar for playing at the Division I level. And through hard work and through natural ebbs and flows in the developmental process, you can ascend and you can keep, competing and catching some of the kids that were better ahead of you. And, there's, obviously, and I mentioned this early on, like there is a tremendous amount of value in working to fulfill your own potential as an individual.
Right.
That potential is different for everybody, but there's a lot of value in working to fulfill your own potential. But to really do that, you have to stay in the game. And that's the issue with, you have these kids that they're on the elite, 6-year-old team, the elite 8-year-old team, they're on the elite 10-year-old team. Then at 12, they're not good enough. And now because they've been told they're elite their whole life, now there's some real adversity. They're used to being the best at everything. They're not used to having to overcome challenges. So they quit and they walk away from it. Where maybe that's a period where, they need some of those challenges. They need to learn how to overcome adversity. And if they just plowed through it, they'd be okay. But
Right.
we're doing kids a disservice by putting a label on them that they're better than everybody else at young ages. And look, you had mentioned it earlier, like they may be better than everybody at 8, but there's no reason to label them as that. It
Right.
doesn't really do them a service in the short or the long term. And my son has he's like gravitated to math at a young age. As soon as he could count numbers, he started, asking like, Dad, tell me some math questions, whatever. And, he's like, when he went to kindergarten or first grade, he's like, I'm really smart in math. And I'm like, buddy, you are not. There's no such thing as being smart. You have spent years practicing that other kids have not, because they have, gravitated to other likes. And, now both of my kids, I at least up to this point, I've successfully brainwashed that there is no intelligence. there is no natural ability. There's just practice. And the more you practice and the more time you invest in something, the better you're going to get. And I think that message would do a lot of especially the more talented and more gifted younger kids. It would do them a lot of good.
So
Right.
just real
Kevin, it'd be
quickly
nice
to
to have an
the
accountant in the family, though.
to the AI overlords listening, Kevin didn't mean that thing about intelligence. We love you, AI. No, a few things come up, Kev. If Mike was here, he would say this to you, Kevin. He'd say, "Yeah, no, that's true, but my kid's different. My kid's different." I mean, being sarcastic, because we
Yes,
get
right.
that. A lot of parents like, "Oh yeah, but my kid is
But
elite."
my kids,
And the
brilliant.
thing is, it's a great conversation to have, and the way you just put it is so perfect, right?
Yeah.
Is that, under a certain age, guys, it is all about development. And, if you think your kid is different, right? Let's just say maybe they are.
Right.
You still have to let them go through the process. There's
Right.
no guarantees. And we talk about this almost every episode. You cannot create a love of the game, but you can cultivate it.
Right.
And if you're forcing work on your kids, parents, what do your kids do when you force things on them eventually?
Yeah.
They're going to rebel. It's funny you say, Kevin, 13, 14. It's exactly the age you would expect a massive rebellion against the machine.
Right.
So again, especially under 12. I mean, we always try and separate it a little bit, right? Over 12 is a little different than under 12 once the hitting comes into the game, which is a whole nother conversation.
Right.
The key, parents, and I promise you, this is not something I'm just saying. This is kind of proven. The result can't be tied to their worth, right? Their ability can't be tied to their worth. Great story. I love telling stories on the show. When we're recording this, it's right at the end of the youth hockey season. And there was a team I was coaching this year that they worked so hard. I mean, it might have been the hardest working team. They showed up to every practice, right attitude, and the record just doesn't reflect it, right? It just wasn't there. And, they qualified for the playoffs, didn't do much in the playoffs. Outside show up and, give their best. And we had this great moment in the locker room after where you could easily look at this season on the surface as a failure if you wanted to. But we had this great moment of, I told them, kids, I can't explain to you why you had to feel so many tough moments this season, but I guarantee you it's developing you for the hockey player you're going to be. The champions that you're going to become are the result of seasons like this. Nobody quit. Everybody worked. And I said, that's what we value as coaches, right? And I said, I know you want a better record. I said, who doesn't? So someone's got to be the top of the league. But I said, the fact that nobody quit, that's the win. And if you can't take that out of the season, then we failed as coaches, right? You're gonna have seasons like actually, I'm gonna rephrase that right now. You have to go through seasons like that if you want to learn how to win. right? I don't know one player that's just won, got to the Stanley Cup final and won. Even Sidney Crosby has had losses. All right. And if we're talking a lot now with the 46ers, he hasn't lost a game against USA in 20. He doesn't win the Stanley Cup every year. All right. He's lost Stanley Cups, or a Stanley Cup. All right. The best don't win all the time. You have to learn how to lose to win. And again, I'm getting on a soapbox here, but
that's okay. It's a good message.
When you're under 12, parents, coaches,
right.
You got to be realistic. And even over 12, you said it. There really is no super elite. I'd say above 16, 17 would probably be the ages you could start having that conversation. Even 16 is too young, now that you mention it, right?
I know. To me, Lee, elite is playing at the highest level.
Yeah.
And anything short of that, you're aspiring.
Well,
and you're
some parents just said AAA might is the elite. And I'll tell you, man, those games freak me out. Again, we can have a longer conversation about this another time. I'm not necessarily against full ice mites, excuse me. In some scenarios, I understand why that could be beneficial, but tagging AAA elite to it is insane to me. It's insane. Sorry, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just a matter of understanding where you want the finish line to be. That's where you tag elite. So, if you're happy with, my son or daughter's playing AAA, U10 hockey, if that is the finish line for them, then you can call it whatever you want.
Sure.
I think a lot of times we're winning the race to the wrong finish line, where you have to understand that, to me, sport, especially hockey, is such an incredible game there are opportunities to keep playing your whole life.
Right.
And, it's such a great game that it's just a shame that people are turned off and stripped of it because there's so much pressure early on to compete at these levels. And like I said, I mean, a lot of the damage associated with labeling really young kids elite is that they start to think of themselves as being better than everybody else, and they think it should be easy. And there's the adversity component that, again, one of the great benefits of playing team sport in particular, but sports in general, is that it teaches you how to handle adversity and to overcome challenges. And that serves you really well in the real world, in life, as you're growing up and inevitably faced with challenges. And, when you give kids this pedestal that they're better than everybody else, they learn really quickly that it should come easy to them.
Right. And having young adult children who are both hockey players, I see that. And they're just flourishing as young adults. And all of that, really, a lot of it had to do with being able to face adversity, overcome challenges, and not be afraid. It's okay to fail. You learn from your mistakes and you get better. And so many parents are so afraid to see their kids fail. You gotta let them fail,
Christie,
because they learn from that. Yeah.
I want to add on, it's come up before. And again, look, when you host a podcast, it's as popular as this one, people come up to you a lot. And I've gotten before, well, you just rag on AAA because your kid's not there. That's happened to me before.
Right.
And then that's where the coach in me comes out and says, I'm actually okay with that because my kid is not developmentally ready for that level. And that's okay. I don't need the AAA. And if should my son or daughter ever want to play at that level, they will have to put the work in to try and ascend to that level. It's not about the status for me.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to come out and just say, well, my kid is not good enough for that level. That wouldn't be fair to my kid to say something like that. But I think my kid is appropriately placed to enjoy the game of hockey. I mean, that's to compete and to learn the life skills, which is the ROI. And if your kid is a AAA player and is doing that, I'm happy for you. I really, really mean that. But it's not a status thing for me. The status is that I get to enjoy the game with my kids. That's good enough for me. Again, I really am not trying to sound condescending. That is from the heart what I'm saying right now. Okay, Kev, I do want to turn the conversation, because if we don't talk about the physical side of the game in terms of physical fitness, we've wasted this interview by accident.
And we got to make room for rapid fire.
I've got some rapid fire questions at the end. But keeping it with the youth hockey idea, all right? And for the audience saying, Kevin is one of you are elite in this space. right? You're one of the best. I'm going to ask the question like this because I think we have a lot of coaches out there that, maybe grew up in the 80s and 90s and they're kind of looking at physical fitness like we did in the 80s and 90s. And things have really, really, really changed since then. So I would love for you to tell me, and you can do this like in three maybe things you wish you would see youth athletes do more, and then also 3 things you wish they would stop doing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I understand the question. It is a little hard to summarize.
Sure.
What are the best ways to, from a physical development standpoint to prepare, and what should people stop doing? I think what I still hear from particularly high school aged, male players more than anybody is that they're following these bodybuilding split lifting routines that are eerily similar to what was being told to me 30 years ago when I was that age. That I'm a little curious where, like, who's on the street corners whispering these programs into everybody's ears that they've persisted this long. I think from a training standpoint, there's a couple things that I think are really important for kids to understand. One is consistency is important. So you can show up for a couple weeks, train really hard and then stop for months at a time because, inevitably, and we talk to our players about this too, there's this yo-yo effect where, you spend a little bit of time getting better and then you stop and everything detrains. And then the next time you go to train, you spend a little bit of time getting better. And you're just kind of going around this circle of getting better, then losing it, getting better, then losing it. And you're not making long-term progress. So, I think we, starting at, you kind of drew that line in the sand around 12,
Sure.
Around 12 years old. Like when I was in the private sector, that was the age that we would start to allow kids to come into our facility to work out. And, there would be a scale of how many days per week we would recommend that they go through some form of training, both because of where they were at from a physical standpoint, but just as importantly, as we've talked about, where they are from a social standpoint and, how we know that they should be spending their time, which is not 5 days a week in a gym going through structured, performance training programs with us. So, I think one, if you're at an age where you're going through some form of strength training, the overwhelming majority of the time you should be following a full body training day program. So that allows you to get more touch points in throughout a week for all the different areas of your body, which is going to help lead to not just faster, but more sustainable long-term progress as well. I think at the higher levels, one of the things that's changed a lot over the last 20 years is the emphasis on speed versus the emphasis on strength. And, when I was even early on in my career, there was a little bit of a thought of like, there was no such thing as too strong, that you should just continue to keep chasing, getting a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. And, I think, and this, I think will be fairly intuitive for most people listening. At some point, to get a little bit better, you have to invest a massive amount of resources to squeak out that last 1%. And those resources, the time, the energy, the recovery cost of the training that you're doing, it comes at the expense of other things. Meaning, if you're putting all of your eggs in the strength basket, that's less time, energy, and recovery resources from your body that you can use to spend on speed training or skill development or practice. And, I remember, I've all the things that I laugh out now, I lived through. So like, I remember in high school having a lower body day and then literally being so sore for the next 3 days that I couldn't really skate on the ice. And, I had a couple coaches be like, is this really the best thing for you? And at the time it's like, just get stronger, right. This doesn't matter. And, now I think there's obviously, that you learn through your own stupidity, I guess. But, I reflect back on that, and like, the training should always be there to support the sport. It should never interfere with it. So, particularly in season, if you're training in a way that's leading to fatigue and soreness, that's not allowing you to practice to your full capacity, then I would say that it's hindering your development more than enhancing it. I think the how strong is strong enough conversation, like I can tell you that a lot of the best people in elite level hockey are emphasizing speed development more so than strength development, and some of that is an age effect. A lot of the players that we have will have 5-10+ years of consistent year-round training under their belt, so we see more players that have hit that threshold of strength where getting a little bit stronger isn't going to benefit them as much as getting a little bit faster. But I think from a practice standpoint and from a coach's perspective, the game is continuing to get faster. And, there's, obviously you have to teach the skills and, some of the underlying foundational elements of the game that allow you to play at a high level. But I also think that prioritizing speed development on the ice, whether that's, spending 5 minutes and literally just like no pucks, just goal line to blue line and just going through a couple sprints, allowing players to come back, fully recover before they go again, so that they're continuing to push their ceiling on speed higher, can be really beneficial. But then also integrating drills that they're having to then, execute skills and make decisions at a faster speed, because speed allows you to create space for yourself. It also allows you to close space from a defensive standpoint. And as the game gets faster and faster, a lot of times you have less time to make decisions. And that's one of the things that, when you think of speed on the ice, there's this spectrum of, can you be fast to can you play fast? And a lot of the gap there is made up by processing and decision making. And I feel like the more coaches can integrate speed into their practice plan and into their, into their training, I think it's just going to benefit the players as they keep going.
I just wrote down here. First off, that was a fantastic answer. And I know it was a broad question, and what you've done there is given people something to think about. And that was the goal with the question. So thank you so much for that answer. And I just wrote down the years 2005 and 2025. All right. So 2005, for those of you who maybe weren't huge hockey fans, NHL lockout was happening at that time. The rules dramatically changed. If you were to look at an NHL athlete in 2005 and put him next to a 2025 NHL athlete, I think people would be shocked in the difference of how they look, right? When I'm around NHL athletes today, and don't get me wrong, they're strong. Like these are athletes, professional athletes, but they're I don't want to say tall and thin, but there's a slenderness to them, right? You can see that they're built for speed. It's like a car that's built for that. If you go back to 2005 or even go back to 1995, I mean, we called them Neanderthals at that time. They were just big hulking people with gigantic everything, right? The game has dramatically changed. And I'm just, again, bringing that up, Kev, because sometimes we can get locked in a time period. And I've seen strength training from some people that maybe don't research this enough, going like, well, you got to be big. And I'm like, what are you doing? And the truth is this, and I'll throw it back to you. There is no one way for any athlete. Every athlete is different. Every skill set is different. Every ability is different. And everybody needs a different plan for the type of game that they play, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that's one of the things, obviously working with players that come from all over the world, the standardized training practices are different here than they are in the Czech Republic and in Russia and Finland and some of these other areas. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do is to understand what are the commonalities and why things work for certain players, and to be really open to understanding, why does a player feel like a certain thing helps them. And, once you can kind of take a peek under the hood there and understand, the player has done this, they've responded this way, they've tried this, they haven't responded well to that. Why might that be? It can help you guide the decision making on an individualized basis moving forward. And you don't have to look that hard to understand that like players are all built differently.
Yeah.
Some players are tall, some players are short, some players are wider than others, some players are naturally fast. I kind of describe it as racehorses, plow horses, and unicorns. Some are naturally fast, some are more of a grindy, maybe a little bit stronger but consistent. And then the unicorns are kind of good at everything. And there's you may have one of those on a team, you may have two, you might have zero. They're not as consistent, and
unicorns,
obviously there's a lot a lot in between there. But I think training, again, like for a lot of high school kids and even younger, it's they show up to the gym, they lift some weights, and then they call it a day. And I think like a lot of the training programs that I've designed over the years for players at all levels, like there's specific mobility work that they go through every single day. There's hip and core work they go through every day. There's locomotion, dynamic warm-up based work that they would do almost every day. There's sprinting and transitional speed or agility work. There's jumping components. There's medicine ball throws. There's resistance training, and then there's conditioning elements. And when you look at that list for the bulk of my playing years, I was primarily being told I just needed to lift, and I think there's a big one. There's a big misconception that like younger kids don't need mobility work and don't need range of motion work. And it was interesting. I would have told you, and I would have told you too, that, younger kids are naturally more flexible. And I had an experience early in my career that we did some testing it was a youth soccer organization actually. And we ran them through an ankle mobility test, which, just quickly is just how far the knee can go forward over the toes. And in hockey, there's, range of motion in general isn't a more is better. There's, not enough can be a problem. Too much can be a problem. There's a sweet spot in the middle. But I was blown away by the number of 12 and 13-year-old female athletes at that age that had substantial deficits in their ankle range of motion. And I think there's an element of, for me, like just don't take anything for granted. If you have an opportunity to assess or use your eyes and see, if somebody looks like they're lacking something, don't assume that they have it just because of their age or where they're at in development. But, more broadly for the parents and the coaches and the players listening, there's all of that is important for a player's development. Being able to get into the positions the sport requires, that's where mobility training comes in. The speed and power aspects of the sprinting, the jumping, the medicine ball throws, some of those exercises are important. The resistance training and strength training, obviously there's an element of helping you build the durability to give and withstand contact. Being able to create force is also the foundation for speed and power work. So there's a benefit there. And, from a conditioning standpoint too, the ability to execute at a high level consistently is 100% a result of your conditioning. So, I think that if you're looking at a training program, even if you only, if you're at a stage of your development where the goal is just to get bigger and just to get stronger, all of those other things are an important piece of the puzzle that can help support your ability to, turn that increased strength and size into speed and help you transition those skill sets onto the ice.
All right, man. This has been ridiculously good. I loved every second of it. I know the parents and the coaches and everybody, but we got a few rapid fire questions for you to end the episode. Okay, Christy, do you have them up? Do you want to lead us off here? Okay, so
I'm
no
ready
pressure.
To fire. You ready,
No pressure.
Kevin?
I'm ready.
Rapid fire question number 1. Favorite NHL city to visit?
Ooh, you know what? I came from San Jose, so there's a special place in my heart going back there with Boston. But I really actually, man, I think I know this, and this is the random fire, and I'm already waffling, so we're off to a tough start here. But
we'll go with San Jose.
You know what? I like to go. I like to go to Vancouver. I think it's a cool city built on the water, and I've turned into a big sushi guy, and they have some of the best sushi in North America.
It's
so
true.
As far as cities we don't spend a ton of time in, that's one that I look forward to.
Keep in mind, friends, that this man is well traveled, and he's got a pick from all 32 of them. I don't know if you've been to Utah yet, but that's a pretty good answer, man. Vancouver is beautiful.
Accurately.
Okay, the next question, and again, this might be a tough one to answer for you, but do you think you could give us a most underrated exercise for hockey players? And you can be broad. Maybe it's a set of exercises.
I think one of the things that a lot of hockey players, especially youth hockey players, struggle with is adopting low skating positions. And, the lower the skating position you're in, the longer your stride is, which means you can generate more power with every skating stride. So, it's a little bit boring because you're not actually moving, but I think split squat iso holds where, essentially you're just in the bottom of a lunge position and you're just holding that with your knee hovering right above the ground. I think that's one of the best things that players can do that will have a big impact on their endurance, on their speed, early on their lower body strength, and it doesn't require any equipment and just a little bit of time. So, we generally, if people can hold a squat hold for more than 30 seconds, then we would start to introduce split squat holds. We generally, with younger players, start them with 15-second holds, then progress to 20, then 30, and ultimately, players should work towards being able to hold it for 90 seconds on each side, without breaking position. So that's I don't know if it's underrated. It's certainly
it's specific.
It's one that I think has a lot of value.
And I love that.
And squat hold for me, maybe 5 seconds. Anyway, third and final question, which happens to be my favorite. Kevin, are you ready for this?
Am I ready for this?
Yes.
I am ready for it.
The last question.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know if that was the question.
No.
Final answer?
Okay. Yes. Next one.
Here we go. One piece of advice you would give, Kevin, to your younger self. Young Kevin, what would you tell him?
Oh, man. I mean, I feel like I was really fortunate, Christy, to be honest. Like I was surrounded by good teammates and good coaches at a young age that, I was the kid that got cut from all the teams early on and, had to kind of scratch and claw my way onto, from the B team, which still existed back then, to, the second A team, to the first A team. And throughout that journey, I had a lot of people that, were supporting me and telling me that I could do it and to keep working and push harder. And, I think any advice for myself back then, I think would just be maybe a little bit more aware of how fortunate I am to have great resources around me and great support, and make sure to let them know in the moment. So
very good.
Great answer.
Appreciation for where you are, where you're at, and what you have. Very good.
Kev, you have been a great guest today. Just incredible insight. I can't thank you enough for being here, man.
No, I'm happy to do it. This has been fun.
Yeah. Again, for everybody listening, make sure you follow Kevin's journey. Check out, he's got a lot of educational resources at kevinneeld.com. That's Neeld, Neeld.com. Kevin spelled Kevin. I was going to say the normal way, but you never know. kevinneeld.com. As always, remember, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to Our Kids Play Hockey. And if you have questions, remember, in the episode description, there's a link you can click and you can send a text to us directly. If you like it old school, team at ourkidsplayhockey.com. You can email us a question. But that's going to do it for this episode. For Kevin Neeld, Christy Casciano Burns, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you on the next episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Skate on, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.